Lord of War is a 2005 crime drama written, produced and directed by Andrew Niccol and co-produced and starring Nicolas Cage in the lead role, with actors like Ian Holm and Jared Leto popping up in smaller roles. The movie is concerned with arms dealing and the trading of weaponry. Cage stars as the arms dealer Yuri Orlov, loosely based on real-life individuals, and him selling weapons to pretty much anyone who's willing to buy them. Communists, dictators, terrorists, it doesn't matter who they are and what the weapons are used for. Yuri's your man if you want some guns. He'll arm either side in a war, sometimes the other side, sometimes both. Throughout his travels across the world to remote areas and dangerous zones, Yuri is pursued by an honest but relentless Interpol agent played by Ethan Hawke. The film charts Yuri's rise and fall, from his time selling handguns to local mobsters in his neighborhood to providing the artillery for mujahideen in the Middle East and warlords in Africa. The way I describe Lord of War, to really simplify things, is that this film is basically the arms-dealing version of Goodfellas, in so many different ways. Just replace the mobsters with machine guns. First of all, the story itself and the narrative techniques are very similar. Like Goodfellas, we follow Yuri from his childhood and his first experience with the weapon, and why he became fascinated with them and how exactly he got about selling them. And like with Goodfellas, Yuri is basically our window into this obscure world, and using narration he gives us the lowdown of how things work, giving us a crash course in the lingo and how-to of arms dealing. Cage is an excellent pick as Yuri, as he perfectly balances the deadpan dark humour of the film, of which there is quite a bit, with the uneasy and unsettling reality that this man is making a very fine living off the murder and tyranny against innocent people, and again, much like Henry Hill in Goodfellas, Yuri manages to justify what he does in order to ease his conscience, by, for example, saying that what people do with the guns he sells is none of his business, and if he didn't do it, someone else would do it anyway. He's the ultimate poster child for the phrase, "Guns don't kill people, people kill people." However, that very conscience does end up catching up with him, and the second half of the film is very different, as Yuri, mainly due to talking with his more ethically challenged younger brother and partner, and his wife, who's purposefully ignorant of the extent of his activities, Yuri starts to feel the need to pull away from this world he is in where people kill and maim each other, so long as he gets his paycheck at the end. I know that sounds like a cliche, but with the way the film handles it, it really isn't. And in fact, the ending of the film is very surprising, with some of the decisions Yuri makes, and what actually ends up happening to him. And the film even ends on a few title credits that take some serious, solid and brave shots at countries like the US, UK and France, some of the biggest arms dealers in the world. I was shocked that a mainstream Hollywood movie was able to end the way it did, but upon further research I discovered that this project was actually rejected in Hollywood, and ended up being financed independently. Lord of War is very dark, but at the same time it is very fun. Gun fanatics will get a proper kick out of the film. There's an entire segment, for example, dedicated to the glorious nature and universal appeal of the AK-47. The film should not be as funny as it is, but in spite of the evil you see on screen, you can't help but laugh at lines like, "I never sold to Osama bin Laden, not on moral grounds, but because his checks were always bouncing back then." The film is concerned a lot with morality and selling one's soul. It keeps you on your toes with surprisingly upfront scenes and lines, like one part where Yuri tells us that there is one firearm for every 12 people in the world. He gives us time to digest this, and then he follows this up with, "So how do we arm the other 11? It also looks at the relationship between arms dealers and governments, including the US's one. There's also other interesting themes the film tackles, such as the way gun violence has become such a part of our culture and way of life that it's a form of entertainment in films, books and video games. There's a particularly cool scene in the film, quietly powerful, where Yuri, after a tough week of exploiting warfare and selling arms to warlords, comes home when his kid is asleep and, spotting the boy's toy gun, quietly picks it up and puts it in the bin. Something spotted by Yuri's brother, and one of the first signs in the film that the apparently morally bankrupt Yuri is actually in the middle of a moral crisis. Yuri's younger brother Vitali is the polar opposite of Yuri, despite both starting off as partners. Where Yuri at his peak is rational, indifferent, and catering to the supply and demand mentality, Vitali seems to be the one absorbing all of the guilt and remorse from what the doer do, and it ends up breaking him. This is not the kind of film you see very often. It takes something so real, so true, and so dangerous, something most of the general public don't know about, and it packages it in a fun crime romp. It feels as though someone took a few paragraphs out of a John Perkins or John Pilger novel and made a dark comedy out of it. I thought it was a great film, entertaining on so many levels. I give it an 8 out of 10.